The sun was bright that morning, and the city street was alive with noise. Cars honked, people hurried to their jobs, and shopkeepers called out to passing customers. Among the crowd walked a poor-looking man. His clothes were old and faded. His shoes worn out from walking too many miles. His hair was messy, and his face carried the look of someone who had seen many struggles in life. He had no money in his pocket and no real destination, but he walked slowly, as if searching for something to lift his heart. As he moved along the busy sidewalk, something suddenly caught his eye. It was parked right in front of a fancy cafe, glowing red under the sunlight. A Ferrari, its body shined like a jewel, polished so well that he could see his reflection in it. The man stopped walking. His tired eyes widened with wonder, and for a few moments he forgot all his troubles. He had seen cars before, of course. He'd admired them from afar, always keeping his distance because he knew they belonged to a world different from his. But this Ferrari was right there, only a few steps away, close enough to touch. It looked like a dream on wheels, and he couldn't resist staring at it. He looked around at the people rushing by. No one else seemed to care. For them, expensive. Cars were nothing unusual. But for him, it was rare beauty, something he might never see again so close. His heart beat faster as he stepped toward the car. Every detail amazed him: the smooth curves, the silver horse emblem at the front, the shining rims. He thought about all the nights he had slept in shelters or on benches, all the mornings he had woken up hungry. He never had anything fine or beautiful in his life. And now, standing in front of this car, he felt a strange mix of sadness and happiness. Slowly, almost shyly, he lifted his hand. His fingers trembled as he stretched them forward. He wasn't thinking of stealing or damaging it. He just wanted to feel what greatness felt like, even if only for a second. To him, touching the Ferrari was like touching a dream, something untouchable becoming real. His hand brushed against the smooth, cool surface of the hood. The metal felt strong, flawless, almost alive. For that moment, the man closed his eyes. He imagined himself behind the wheel, driving down an empty road, with the wind in his hair, free from all worries. He smiled faintly, a smile that rarely appeared on his face, but his small moment of peace was short-lived. The cafe door suddenly slammed open, and sharp footsteps echoed against the pavement. The man quickly turned his head. A woman in high heels and a designer dress came rushing out. Her face was painted with makeup, her jewelry sparkled in the sunlight, and her sunglasses covered half her face. She looked powerful, rich, and impatient. Her eyes locked on him, and in an instant, her calm expression turned into one of rage. She saw his hand resting lightly on the hood of the Ferrari, and her mouth opened in fury. "Get away from my car!" she screamed. Her voice cut through the air like a knife, loud enough for people nearby to stop and stare. The man froze. He quickly pulled his hand back, as if the car had burned him. His lips parted, but no words came out. His throat felt dry. The woman stomped closer, pointing her manicured finger at him. "How dare you touch it? Do you even know how much this car costs, you filthy beggar? Don't you dare lay a hand on it again." The poor man lowered his eyes. Ashamed, he wanted to explain, to tell her he meant no harm, but her voice was too strong, too filled with anger. Every insult made him feel smaller, weaker, as if he truly had no right to even breathe near her car. Around them, the city's noise seemed to fade as people slowed down to watch. Some whispered, others shook their heads. To them, it looked like a rich woman defending her property against a poor man. No one knew the truth of what he had felt in that moment. No one knew he only wanted to touch beauty, not to harm it. The man took a small step back. His heart raced, not from guilt, but from humiliation. He wished the ground would swallow him, so he didn't have to face the woman's piercing eyes or the stranger's stares. Still, deep inside, a quiet thought remained. He had touched the Ferrari. For one heartbeat in his sad life, he had touched something extraordinary. And even if the world laughed at him or cursed him, that single moment was his, and no one could take it away. But the woman wasn't done. Her voice grew sharper, her anger louder. And though the man stood silently, the scene had only just begun. The woman's voice rose higher and sharper, echoing off the cafe's glass windows and bouncing across the street. The poor man stood frozen, his head lowered, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. He had never felt so small. He wanted to vanish, to disappear into the crowd, but his feet would not move. "Do you know how much this car costs?" she shouted, her words cutting him down like knives. "This car is worth more than your entire life. Look at you, dirty clothes, broken shoes, Nan, you dare to touch my Ferrari." Her words poured out like fire, each one hotter than the last. She wasn't just angry, she was cruel. Hush. She wanted everyone around to hear her, to see the difference between her world and his. People passing by began to slow down. Some stopped. At the sidewalk, curious. A few whispered to each other, while others simply shook their heads. But no one stepped forward to defend him. The poor man lifted his head slightly, his lips parting. "I'm sorry," he said softly, his voice weak and trembling. "I didn't mean anything. He trailed off." His voice was so quiet it was almost lost in the air, and the woman immediately cut him off. "Sorry? You think sorry is enough? What if you scratched the paint? What if you left dirt on it? You even understand how expensive this is? This is not for people like you. You don't belong anywhere near it." The man swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to explain that he wasn't trying to harm anything, that he just admired the car's beauty. But he knew she wouldn't listen. Her eyes were blazing with pride and anger, her face red as she waved her hands dramatically. "You beggars," she hissed, "always wandering the streets, always looking for things that don't belong to you. You see something fine, and you just have to ruin it. Get away. Go back to the gutter where you belong." The crowd grew thicker now. A mother pulled her child closer, as if afraid the poor man might suddenly attack. A group of young men snickered, amused by the scene. The poor man could feel their eyes on him, judging, mocking. His chest ached with shame. "I wasn't trying to ruin anything," he whispered again, but his voice was drowned by her rage. "Don't lie," she snapped. "I saw you. You were touching it like you wanted to steal it. Do you know what thieves look like? They look just like you." The man's hands clenched, not in anger, but in helplessness. He had lived his whole life trying to avoid trouble, trying to keep his head down. But no matter what he did, the world always seemed to see him as a problem. Now, standing in front of this furious woman, he felt stripped of all dignity. The woman took another step closer, her high heels clicking loudly on the pavement. She was so close he could smell the expensive perfume on her, sharp and heavy. Her manicured finger jabbed toward his chest. "If you even breathe near this car again, I'll call the police," she threatened. "And don't think for 1 second they'll believe you. Look at you. One look at your face and they'll know you're guilty." The man lowered his gaze once more, staring at the ground. The dust at his feet felt safer than her eyes. He wanted to leave, but something inside him, something quiet and stubborn, kept him rooted. He had done nothing wrong. He had touched a car, nothing more. Why should he run like a criminal? But the woman's shouting grew louder, her voice reaching every ear in the street. "Everyone look at this man," she cried. "This is what happens. When you let beggars wander around, you can't resist touching what isn't theirs. He thinks he can put his filthy hands on my car. People murmured, nodding as if agreeing with her. Others simply watched, their expressions unreadable. To the poor man, it felt like the whole world was against him. His chest tightened, his breath shallow. He remembered nights spent hungry, mornings spent searching trash bins for food. He remembered children pointing at him in the park, laughing at his torn clothes. He remembered being invisible when he needed help, but now, when he was being insulted, suddenly everyone could see him. His lips trembled as he whispered again, "I only wanted to see it. Just once. That's all." But his quiet honesty was swallowed up by her cruelty. "You disgust me," the woman spat. "Go before I really lose my temper. People like you are nothing but trouble. If you want to look at cars, go to a junkyard. Leave the real ones to people who can afford them." The poor man felt a sting in his chest, like her words had pierced straight into his heart. He had faced hunger, loneliness, and cold nights, but this humiliation in front of strangers was worse. He turned slightly, ready to walk away, ready to end the scene. But something in the crowd shifted. People's heads turned toward the cafe door again. Another figure was stepping out, a man in a suit, tall, calm, and watchful. His presence was quiet but strong, like a wave moving through the air. His eyes scanned the scene, and when they landed on the poor man, they softened. The woman, noticing him, straightened her back and adjusted her sunglasses. She quickly called out, "Sir, you should have seen what this man was doing to my car. He was trying to touch it, maybe even steal it. I caught him red-handed." The poor man's heart sank further. He thought this new figure would also believe her, but he didn't know this was the moment everything would begin to change. The street had grown quieter now, but not because the noise of the city had stopped. It was because all eyes were fixed on the scene unfolding in front of the cafe. The woman's angry voice had drawn a small crowd, and people were curious. Some leaned against the wall, others stood with their arms crossed, and a few even took out their phones to record what was happening. The poor man could feel their stares burning into him, each look filled with judgment, pity, or scorn. He stood still, his shoulders slouched, his hands shaking slightly at his sides. His face was red from shame, not anger. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want trouble. He just wanted the ground to open up and swallow him. But no such escape came. Instead, the woman only grew louder. "Look at him," she cried, pointing toward the poor man as if he were some thief caught in the act. "This beggar thought he could touch my Ferrari, as if he had any right to. Look at his filthy clothes. He probably hasn't showered in weeks. And yet, here he is, trying to ruin what he could never afford in 10 lifetimes. The crowd began to murmur. Some people frowned at the woman's words, uncomfortable with her cruelty. But others nodded, whispering to each other that she was right, that a man like him had no business near a car like that. The poor man felt their whispers, pressed down on him like heavy stones. He wanted to shout that he wasn't a thief, that he wasn't trying to damage the car. He wanted to tell them he only admired it, that he only wanted to touch something beautiful for once in his hard life. But when he opened his mouth, no sound came out. His voice was trapped in his throat, blocked by years of being silenced, ignored, and pushed aside. The woman saw his silence as proof of guilt. She smirked, tilting her chin high. "See, he doesn't even deny it. He knows what he was doing." Her eyes narrowed. "People like him don't deserve to walk these streets. He should be kept far away from decent society." Those words hit him harder than any slap. He lowered his gaze to the ground, staring at the cracks in the pavement. He wished he could melt into them, vanish from everyone's sight. He thought about turning and walking away, but his legs refused to move. Shame pinned him in place, like invisible chains around his ankles. Behind him, Child tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered loudly, "Mom, is he really a bad man?" The mother hushed the child and pulled them closer, but the question stung. Even a child, innocent and curious, was now seeing him as something dangerous. The woman folded her arms and took a step back, her voice ringing out again. I should call the police right now. I'll tell them what you tried to do, and they'll lock you up where you belong. The poor man's chest tightened. He had never stolen anything in his life, yet here he was, treated like a criminal in front of strangers. His lips trembled as he whispered, Please. I didn't mean anything. I was only looking, but no one heard him. Or maybe they didn't. Want to. His words were too soft, too fragile to survive against the storm of the woman's anger. The crowd shifted again. A few people shook their heads at the scene, perhaps feeling pity, but not enough to step forward. Others crossed their arms, enjoying the drama. For the poor man, it felt like he was standing in the center of a stage, with everyone waiting to see his humiliation reach its peak. The woman leaned closer, her voice dripping with scorn. You think you can hide your true nature, but I see it clearly. You're nothing but a thief. That's what you people are. Thieves, liars, parasites. The poor man's jaw tightened. He felt something rise in him, not anger, but sorrow. Sorrow so deep it almost hurt more than hunger, he thought. Of all the nights he had walked these streets alone, invisible. No one ever noticed him then. No one ever cared. But now, when he was being insulted, suddenly he was the center of attention. Suddenly he mattered, but only as an object of shame. He wanted to cry, but he swallowed the tears back. He told himself he couldn't show weakness here, not in front of these people. Not in front of this woman who wanted nothing more than to crush his spirit. Still, the pain in his chest grew heavier with every passing second. The woman finally crossed her arms, tilting her head as though she had one. Pathetic, she spat. Standing here like a fool. You don't even fight back because you know I'm right. The poor man clenched his fists at his sides. He wanted to fight back. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he was more than just his clothes or his poverty. But before he could find the courage to speak, a shadow fell over them. Someone had stepped out from the cafe, a tall man in a clean-fitted suit, his shoes polished, his hair neat. He didn't rush, he didn't shout. He simply walked with calm authority, the kind of presence that made people fall silent without even knowing why. The woman noticed him first. Her face lit up as if she had found an ally. Sir, she called out quickly, pointing toward the poor man again. You came at the right time. This man was trying to touch my Ferrari. He's dangerous. He could have damaged it. I caught him red-handed. The poor man turned his eyes toward the newcomer. His heart sank. He was sure this stranger would also believe her. Why wouldn't he? Everyone else did. He prepared himself for more humiliation. But there was something different about this man. His eyes were not filled with scorn or mockery. They were calm, thoughtful, and strangely kind. He looked at the poor man not like a criminal, but like a human being. For the first time that day, the poor man felt a flicker of hope, though he didn't yet know why. The suited man stepped fully onto the sidewalk, and for a moment the whole scene seemed to pause. His presence was calm yet commanding, the kind that made people turn their heads without knowing why. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't rushing, but something about him carried quiet authority. The poor man noticed how the crowd shifted slightly, giving this stranger more space, as if they respected him already without even knowing his name. The rich woman immediately saw an opportunity. She straightened her dress, adjusted her sunglasses, and raised her voice again, this time with a mix of outrage and self-importance. Sir, you have no idea what I've had to deal with just now. This man, she pointed a sharp finger at. The poor man was trying to touch my Ferrari. Who knows what he was planning? People like him shouldn't even be near cars like these. I caught him red-handed and I was just about to call the police. The crowd murmured. Some nodded. In agreement, others looked uncomfortable. The poor man, however, lowered his head again. His hope, which had flickered for a second, began to fade. He thought the suited man would surely take the woman's side after all. She was rich, confident, and loud, while he was poor, dirty, and silent. But the suited man did not rush to judgment. He looked carefully at the woman first, listening to her dramatic words. Then, slowly, he turned his gaze to the poor man. Their eyes met. Unlike the sharp, accusing eyes of the woman, this man's eyes held no contempt. Instead, there was curiosity and perhaps even a trace of compassion. The poor man's lips parted as if he wanted to explain, but his voice failed. He was used to being silenced, used to people assuming the worst about him. Why would this man be any different? The woman, noticing his hesitation, smirked. See? He doesn't even deny it. He knows what he was doing. She folded her arms and leaned closer to the suited man. Men like him are nothing but trouble. If we let them linger around, they'll only bring filth and crime. The suited man said nothing. Instead, he took one slow step toward the poor man. The crowd leaned in slightly, expecting him to scold the beggar. Even the poor man braced himself for harsh words. But what came instead surprised everyone. What happened? The suited man asked softly, his voice calm and steady. The poor man blinked in shock. No one had asked him that. Not once during this entire humiliation had anyone cared to hear his side. He opened his mouth, but at first, no words came out. His throat felt tight, his chest heavy. Finally, with effort, he whispered, "I didn't mean anything. I wasn't trying to steal. I just wanted to look. Just once." The suited man tilted his head, encouraging him to go on. The poor man took a shaky breath. His voice trembled. As he spoke louder this time, enough for the crowd to hear. "I don't have anything. I've never had anything fine in my life, but I love cars. They're beautiful to me. I only wanted to touch it to feel something I could never own. That's all, I swear." A hush fell over the crowd. His words were simple, but there was something raw in them, something painfully honest. Some people shifted uncomfortably, suddenly ashamed for judging him so quickly. A few even looked away, unable to meet his humble eyes. The rich woman, however, scoffed loudly. "What nonsense! Do you think anyone here believes that? You expect us to believe you are just admiring it? Don't be ridiculous. You're just making excuses. A poor man like you has no business being anywhere near a Ferrari." But her words did not carry the same weight they had before. The crowd wasn't nodding as quickly anymore. Some were even frowning at her arrogance. The suited man remained silent for a moment, his gaze steady on the poor man. Then, almost like a teacher guiding a student, he asked again, "So you touched it, because it made you happy?" The poor man nodded slowly, his eyes dropping. "Just for a second, wanted to know what it feels like to touch something beautiful. I didn't mean any harm, I swear on my life." There was a crack in his voice, and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. The crowd felt it. Even those who had laughed earlier grew quiet now. Attention in the air shifted, tilting away from the woman's fury and toward something more fragile, more human. The woman's face twisted with frustration. She wasn't used to losing control of the crowd. She raised her voice again, desperate to regain the attention. "Don't listen to him. He's lying. He's pretending to be innocent because he doesn't want the police involved. But I won't be fooled. Men like him always have bad intentions." But this time, her words fell flat. The suited man slowly turned toward her, and for the first time since he appeared, his eyes hardened slightly. He didn't raise his voice. But his calm presence seemed to silence her more effectively than any shout could. "You've spoken," he said quietly. "Now let him speak too. That's only fair." The woman froze, her mouth half open, stunned that anyone would dare challenge her. She lowered her sunglasses just enough to glare at him, but she said nothing. The poor man stood there, trembling. Slightly. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. For the first time in years, someone had stood up for his right to speak. Someone had listened. His heart swelled with a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that he was being heard. Fear because he didn't know what this man would do next. The crowd, sensing something unusual, leaned in even more. They were witnessing something rare, a powerful, confident woman being questioned, and a poor, silent man being given dignity. The air was heavy with suspense. No one knew what the suited man would say next, but everyone could feel that the story was far from over. The crowd was silent now, waiting. The rich woman stood with her arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently, as if she couldn't believe she was being challenged. The poor man shifted nervously, his hands twisting together, his heart beating so fast he thought others might hear it. And then the suited man spoke again, his voice low but steady. "Tell me," he said, looking at the poor man, "what did you feel when you touched the car?" The question stunned him. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. No one had ever asked about his feelings before. People usually told him what he was, never cared to know who he was. He looked down, embarrassed, but then slowly raised his head. His lips trembled as he spoke. "It felt like touching a dream," he said softly. His words carried through the crowd because everyone was listening closely now. "All my life, I've had nothing. No home, no money, not even a family anymore. I've slept in shelters, on benches, sometimes on the cold ground. Every day is a fight just to eat. But cars." He paused, his eyes flicking toward the Ferrari. "Cars remind me of beauty. They remind me that the world still has things worth living for. I wasn't trying to take it, only wanted to feel, even for a second, I could be close to something special." His voice cracked, and he looked down again, ashamed of showing so much of himself to strangers. But when he lifted his head slightly, he saw that the crowd was different now. They were no longer laughing or shaking their heads. Some had softened expressions, some even looked guilty. A few lowered their phones, realizing this wasn't just a spectacle, it was a man's pain laid bare in front of them. The suited man nodded, as if he had expected such an answer. His eyes softened, and his lips curved in the smallest hint of a smile. "Thank you for your honesty," he said. But before the poor man could reply, the rich woman exploded. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, throwing her hands into the air. "Do not fall for his little sad story. This is exactly what people like him do. They play the victim, they talk about their struggles, and suddenly, everyone feels sorry. For them, meanwhile, they're planning to rob you the moment you turn your back." Her voice rang out, sharp and bitter. She turned toward the crowd, trying to win them back. "Don't you see? He's clever. He's twisting the story. He's dangerous. If you let him near nice things, he'll ruin them. That's how it always goes." The poor man flinched at her words, but the suited man raised his hand gently, and her shouting stopped as if she had hit an invisible wall. He turned toward her, his calm gaze steady. "You've made your point. Now, let him have his." The woman's face burned with frustration. No one had ever dared to speak to her like that in public. But the suited man's tone carried such quiet authority that she couldn't find the courage to keep shouting. She crossed her arms tightly, fuming. The suited man then looked back at the poor man. "You've told us why you touched the car," he said. "Now tell us why didn't you just keep walking? Why stop at all?" The poor man hesitated. "Us. His chest rose and fell as he took a shaky breath. "Because I was tired," he whispered. "Not just tired in my body, it's tired in my soul. I walk all day with nothing to look forward to. And when I saw the car, it felt like the world was reminding me there was still beauty left. I thought, maybe if I touch it just once, I'll feel alive again." His words hung in the air. The crowd was completely silent. Even the noise of the city seemed distant now, drowned out by the weight of his confession. The suited man studied him carefully, then nodded. He turned toward the crowd, his voice calm but firm. "You see? This man is not a criminal. He is not a thief. But he is just a human being who wanted to feel joy, even for a single second." Some people in the crowd nodded in agreement. A few even whispered, ashamed of how quickly they had judged the poor man before. But the woman scoffed loudly, desperate to hold on to her pride. Joy, by touching someone else's property, that's no excuse. Poor or not, he had no right. The suited man looked at her, his gaze steady, unshaken by her anger. Perhaps. But sometimes, compassion is worth more than property. The woman froze, her face twisting in disbelief. She opened her mouth to argue, but the crowd was no longer with her. The tide had shifted. People were nodding at the suited man's words, their eyes softening toward the poor man. The woman realized she was losing control of the narrative, and it infuriated her. The poor man, meanwhile, stood trembling. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Someone this stranger in a suit was defending him, was giving him dignity in front of everyone. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel completely invisible. He whispered again, almost to himself, "Thank you." The suited man gave him a small nod, as if to say, "You deserve to be heard." The woman tried one last time, her voice dripping with venom. "You're all fools if you believe him. He's just a beggar, nothing more. He doesn't belong anywhere near a Ferrari, near people like us." But her words rang hollow now. The crowd was not convinced. And the suited man, without raising his voice, was about to say something that would change everything. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm waiting to break. The poor man stood trembling, still unsure if he was dreaming or awake. He had never imagined that a stranger would defend him, let alone in front of so many people. The rich woman, however, was not finished. Her pride burned hotter than ever, and she wasn't ready to be silenced. Enough of this nonsense, she shouted, glaring at the suited man. "Why are you even wasting time listening to him? He touched my Ferrari, my car. He has no right, and you know it. I've worked hard for everything I have. People like him just want to take. The poor man flinched again, but the suited man remained calm. He slowly turned toward her, his eyes cool and steady. "You said it's your car," he said softly. "Are you sure about that?" The woman blinked, confused for a moment, then scoffed. "Of course I'm sure. Do you think I don't know my own property? This Ferrari is mine. I bought it. I maintain it." She stopped when she noticed something odd, the suited man's calm smile. It wasn't mocking, it wasn't cruel, it was simply knowing. The poor man frowned slightly, looking between the two of them. He didn't understand what was happening. The suited man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small set of keys. They jingled softly in the air, catching the sunlight. Then, slowly, he held them up for everyone to see. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The emblem on the keychain was unmistakable. "Ferrari, this car," the suited man said clearly, so everyone could hear, "is not yours. It's mine." The street fell silent. The woman's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find her words. She shook her head quickly, almost laughing, but the sound was hollow. What? What are you talking about? No, that's impossible. You're lying. But the suited man calmly walked to the car, pressed the button on the key fob, and in front of everyone's eyes, the Ferrari's lights flashed, and its doors clicked open with a soft electronic sound. The car responded to him, and only him. The crowd erupted in whispers. Some gasped in shock, others chuckled under their breath. A few even laughed outright at the sight of the rich woman's arrogance crumbling in front of them. The poor man stood frozen, staring at the car and then at the suited man. He could hardly believe it. The true owner of the Ferrari was not the angry woman, but the calm stranger who had defended him. The woman's face twisted with humiliation. She stumbled over her words, trying to recover. I was just, well, I was looking after it. Yes, I was making sure no one touched it. That's why I was shouting. I was protecting your property. Her voice was shrill, desperate. She glanced at the crowd, hoping someone would nod in agreement, but no one did. The truth was too clear. The suited man didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at her with quiet disappointment. You weren't protecting my car, he said softly. You were attacking an innocent man. You judged him by his clothes, by his face, by his poverty. And you humiliated him in front of everyone. The woman's eyes darted left and right, looking for support. None came. People were watching her now with disapproval, their earlier sympathy for her gone completely. She opened her mouth again, but found no words that could save her pride. The suited man then turned to the poor man, his expression changing to one of kindness. And you, he said gently, you didn't do anything wrong. You admired something beautiful. That's not a crime. The poor man's lips trembled. He wanted to speak, to say thank you, but the words caught in his throat. His eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in years, they weren't from shame, but from relief. The crowd buzzed with excitement now. Some people clapped quietly. Others shook their heads at the woman, muttering that her arrogance had finally caught up with her. The story was no longer about a poor man touching a Ferrari. It was about a proud woman who had been exposed for her cruelty. The woman tried one last time to defend herself. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know it wasn't his car? Anyone would have thought the same thing, but the suited man raised a hand. His voice was firm now. No, anyone could have paused and asked before shouting. Anyone could have shown kindness instead of cruelty. You chose to humiliate him. That's on you. The poor man felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. It was dignity. Someone had stood up for him, had shown the world that he mattered. He wasn't just a shadow on the streets anymore. The suited man slipped the keys back into his pocket. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, he smiled at the poor man and asked, "Would you like to sit inside?" Gasps rose from the crowd. The woman's jaw dropped. The poor man blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Me, he whispered, pointing at himself. Yes, the suited man said kindly. You admired it. You should know what it feels like to sit in it. The poor man's knees almost buckled. His heart raced. Tears slid down his cheeks, and he nodded slowly. Unable to find his voice, the rich woman stood frozen, her arrogance shattered. The crowd watched eagerly, waiting to see what would happen next. For the poor man, the moment felt unreal, like a dream he never thought he would live. And yet, it was happening. The poor man stood frozen, his eyes wide, his chest rising and falling like he had run a long distance. He thought he had misheard the suited man's words. Sit inside him, in a Ferrari. It sounded impossible. All his life, people had pushed him away from beautiful things, told him he didn't belong, told him he had no right to touch or even look at them for too long. And now, the true owner of the car was offering him something he never dared to dream of. You mean, me? He whispered again, pointing to his chest, his voice trembling like a child's. The suited man smiled gently and nodded. "Yes, you. Come on." He gestured toward the car with calm confidence. The poor man's knees felt weak. For a second, he almost stepped back, afraid this was some kind of trick, some cruel joke. But then he saw the man's eyes calm, warm, honest. There was no mockery there, no trap. Only kindness. The crowd leaned forward, eager to see what would happen next. Whispers spread through the group of onlookers. Some were shocked, others excited, and a few even pulled out their phones to record this unbelievable moment. The rich woman, however, almost exploded with fury. "Are you serious? You can't be serious," she shrieked, her voice shrill. "You're going to let him, this dirty beggar, sit inside your Ferrari? Do you know what kind of mess he'll make? He'll ruin it. He doesn't deserve it." But the suited man didn't even glance at her. He kept his eyes on the poor man, waiting patiently for him to gather the courage. "Go ahead," he said softly, like a teacher encouraging a nervous student. The poor man's throat tightened. His heart hammered as he walked slowly toward the gleaming red car. Every step felt heavier than the last. He could feel the eyes of the crowd following him, judging him, but also some watching with admiration. When he reached the car, his hand hovered over the door handle. His fingers trembled so badly that he was afraid he might not even be able to open it. The suited man gave a small nod. "Go on." With a shaky breath, the poor man wrapped his fingers around the handle. The door opened smoothly. The interior of the Ferrari glowing with luxury. The smell of fine leather rushed out, rich and intoxicating. He had never smelled anything like it in his life. Carefully, almost as if he were afraid the car might vanish, he lowered himself into the seat. The moment his body touched the soft leather, he felt like his entire world had shifted. The seat hugged him, the dashboard gleamed with buttons and lights, the steering wheel sat in front of him like a thrown scepter. His hands trembled as he reached out and placed them gently on the wheel. His heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the noise of the street. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people even clapped. A few murmured things like, "Look at his face, and he's never been this happy in his life." The poor man's eyes filled with tears. He blinked rapidly, trying to stop them from falling, but they slipped down his cheeks anyway. He wasn't embarrassed this time. He didn't care who saw. For once in his life, he wasn't invisible. He wasn't mocked. He was living a dream. The suited man leaned on the doorframe, watching with a kind smile. "How does it feel?" he asked. The poor man's voice broke as he whispered, "It feels like I'm alive again." The crowd grew silent, moved by his words. Even those who had judged him earlier now felt something heavy in their chests. They realized they were witnessing not just a man sitting in a car, but a soul being restored, even if only for a moment. The rich woman, however, could not bear it. Her face twisted with rage and disbelief. "This is insane," she shouted, waving her arms. "You're humiliating me. You're making a fool of yourself. Look at him, he doesn't belong there. He's poor. He's nothing." But her words no longer had the power they once did. The crowd, instead of nodding along, now glared at her with disapproval. A man from the crowd even muttered, loud enough for her to hear, "You're the only fool here." Others nodded, murmuring in agreement. The poor man gripped the wheel a little tighter, closing his eyes for a moment. In his mind, he saw himself driving down an open road, the world rushing past him. No hunger, no cold nights, no shame. Just freedom. Just life. When he opened his eyes again, he looked at the suited man and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you. More than I can ever say." The suited man's expression grew serious, but his eyes stayed kind. "Never let anyone tell you that you don't deserve to touch beauty," he said firmly. Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves kindness. Those words struck the poor man's heart like sunlight breaking through clouds. He nodded slowly, his tears falling freely now. The rich woman stood stiff, her face burning with humiliation. As the crowd whispered about her cruelty and arrogance, no one was on her side anymore. She had been exposed, not the poor man. The suited man stepped back and let the poor man stay seated for a moment longer, savoring the experience. The crowd continued to watch, their expressions softer now, touched by the scene. For once, people weren't laughing at him. They were moved by him. It was a moment he would never forget. A moment when his worth was acknowledged, when he wasn't. Just a poor man on the street, but a human being allowed to feel joy. And the story wasn't over yet. The poor man sat in the Ferrari for a long moment, his hands resting gently on the steering wheel. His fingers traced its smooth surface as if it were something sacred. His eyes were wide, drinking in every detail: the polished dashboard, the glowing lights, the soft leather beneath him. For the first time in years, he felt like life had given him a gift instead of only pain. Tears streamed silently down his face, but these tears were not of shame or hunger. They were tears of gratitude, of disbelief that someone had shown him kindness when he least expected it. The crowd around the car remained quiet, watching. Some were recording with their phones, others just stood in silence, their expressions softening as they saw the man's joy. Even the busy city street seemed to pause for him. People had passed him by 100 times before, ignoring him as if he didn't exist. But now, everyone's eyes were on him, not in judgment, but in respect. The suited man leaned on the open door, his voice calm and steady. "You see," he said, "happiness doesn't belong only to the rich. Everyone deserves a moment like this." The poor man looked up at him, his lips trembling. He wanted to say so much how this moment meant more to him than food, how he would remember it for the rest of his life, but all he managed to whisper was, "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." The suited man smiled kindly. "Oh, I think I do." The rich woman, however, was burning with anger. Her face was red, her pride shattered. She crossed her arms and snapped, "This is ridiculous. You're humiliating yourself, letting someone like him touch your Ferrari. Do you know how dirty he is? Do you know what people will say about you?" But this time, her words fell flat. The crowd didn't nod in agreement. They didn't laugh. Instead, they looked at her with disapproval. A man in the crowd even shook his head and muttered, "You should be ashamed." A woman near him whispered, "That poor man never hurt anyone, and she treated him like trash." The rich woman heard those whispers, and her face twisted with humiliation. For the first time, she realized the crowd was no longer on her side. She tried to defend herself, waving her hands. "I was only protecting the car. How was I supposed to know it wasn't mine?" Anyone would have thought the same. No one believed her anymore. Her arrogance had been exposed, and the suited man's calm truth had silenced her. The suited man stood tall and spoke clearly so everyone could hear. It's easy to judge by appearances. Easy to look at someone's clothes or their empty pockets and think they have no worth. But today, all of you saw the truth. Kindness reveals more about a person than money ever could. The crowd nodded. Some even clapped softly. The poor man felt his chest tighten, but this time not from shame. This time it was from pride. For once, he wasn't being pitied or mocked. He was being seen as human, as someone who mattered. The suited man turned back to him. "Would you like me to start the engine for you?" he asked gently. The poor man's eyes widened, and he shook his head quickly. No, this is enough. I couldn't. I don't want to ruin anything. Just sitting here is more than I ever dreamed. The suited man smiled again. Very well. He reached out and placed a hand on the poor man's shoulder. Remember this moment. And remember, you are more than what others see on the outside. The poor man nodded, his tears falling freely now. With trembling hands, he slowly stepped out of the car. As he stood on the pavement again, the crowd began to clap real applause, loud and heartfelt. The sound washed over him, warming him. From the inside, he had never been applauded in his life. He had never been cheered. But now, strangers were clapping for him, not out of mockery, but out of respect. The rich woman turned away, humiliated. She tried to slip back into the cafe, hoping to escape the eyes of the people who now saw her for what she was. But whispers followed her, whispers of disapproval that she would never forget. The poor man lowered his head, still overwhelmed. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. But the suited man shook his head firmly. "Everyone deserves dignity. Remember that." The poor man finally smiled, a true, heartfelt smile that had been missing from his face for years. Dee whispered, "Again, thank you." And the suited man simply nodded, as if to say, "You're welcome."
Always.
The crowd began to disperse, but the story lingered in the air. Some people would go home and tell their families about what they had seen. Others would remember the lessons silently, keeping it in their hearts. But none of them would forget how a poor man, once humiliated, had been lifted up by a simple act of kindness. As the suited man got into his Ferrari, the poor man stepped back, watching with awe. He didn't feel envy this time. He didn't feel pain. He only felt grateful that for one shining moment he had been given the chance to touch beauty and to be treated with respect. The Ferrari's engine roared to life, powerful and smooth. The poor man closed his eyes, savoring the sound. He knew he would carry it with him forever. Like music that never fades, the suited man gave him one last smile before driving away. The crowd slowly melted back into the city, but the poor man remained standing there, his heart lighter than it had been in years. That day changed him. Not because he sat in a Ferrari, but because someone had shown him that kindness could break through even the deepest humiliation. He'd been reminded that he was not invisible, not worthless. He was human, and that was enough. And as he walked away, his steps felt different. They were no longer heavy with shame, but lighter, filled with hope. For the first time in a long time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, life still had something good waiting for him.